What's going on, guys? Okay, that's a bit too much. You can't be too much of the time. This has been Life Lessons with Ryan. Next on the series, we're going to continue with the Bobby Fischer legacy and look at one of these fine and dandy, absolutely wonderful games that Yuri has prepared. And he puts a lot of work on this, you guys. So let's give him a listen and try not to pay attention or notice the noisy fan in the background. Do not think about the really noisy window fan situation in the background. Don't pay attention to that. Because he's got a lot of good stuff to say. The audio stuff is still a work in progress, though. And we are off and running. Coach Yogi, what are we looking at today?
Well, hello everybody. I am looking today to continue our Bobby Fischer legacies and a review of his exciting games and great wins. And
Yay!
I learned the techniques and the middle game concept that he used, and appreciate all the energy and kind of like initiative field games that he had. Very, very aggressive, ambitious style. In this game, I would like to review his game against Paul Benko, who actually recently passed away, lived well past 90. Was a great chess player, represented the United States with Bobby Fischer at Chess Olympiads, was a World Chess Championship candidate, so a pretty strong player of its own right. And in this game, Bobby Fischer was white and played his favorite Sicilian defense. Line was Bishop c4. Now, this line has a name in chess. It's called So's inversion. Probably need to let me somehow share the.
Oh, let's see. I'll try it again. Yeah, give remote control. Here we go.
So in this game, we have Sicilian defense, and it started off as Sicilian classical. Knight c6 takes, and knight f6, knight c3, d6. So this is called classical version. Now, there's many ways to play against it. Bishop e2, bishop e3, bishop g5. Bob Fischer used to play bishop c4. It's actually called Sozin attack. It was created by a chess master, Sozin, from Soviet Union at the time. Not really a particularly known player, but he was quite a theoretician. He was also the one that created the attack against the dragon, bishop e3, f3, queen d2, that later had a name Yugoslav attack. So,
Hmm.
what's the idea behind bishop c4? Well, he's aiming to attack f7.
Right.
Not as easy to do in a Sicilian, but nevertheless possible. Usually, it's the effort of E and F pawns, the bishop and the rook from f1, and potentially the queen from somewhere near that opens up the position. But bishop c4 kind of begins the game and opens up the attack on f7. So black normally plays e6 here. In modern games, I've mostly seen this. Bishop would go to e3 after e6, and then bishop e7, and then queen e2, castle, and then queenside castle would start what is known as the Bridge attack, which is the attack named after a Yugoslav grandmaster that played many, many, many very successful games here as well. And just to kind of illustrate what kind of line that can be, rook takes d4, b5, g5, knight d7. You can see that the pawn roll on the king side can be quite intimidating, but a lot
Right.
of system players are not easily intimidated by the pawn roll, so they continue their own routine. Bishop b7, rook c8, knight c5, or knight e5, and so on. So,
Is this still
a very
balanced?
position. What's that?
Is this still balanced at that point?
Still balanced?
Yeah, I mean, this looks pretty one sided. Isn't this just crushing for white right now?
No, I don't think it's necessarily really that bad. You can actually resist here in a position like this quite effectively. You
Yeah.
have some counterplay by playing knight c5, rook b8, b4,
Right, right.
bishop e7, knight c5, rook c8, and attack on e4. So this is actually a fairly complicated position. I would be more comfortable playing white, to be honest with you. That would be my kind of position to play for white. I don't play positions like this very well with black. I don't like to be ambushed in a kingside response. So that's kind of a more modern take on this. At the time this game was played, Velimirovich attack was not yet kind of a mainstream line. I think it just kind of gained the popularity in late 60s. So, and here Benko played the move that isn't really super popular, and at the first sight looks like a tempo loss. Queen b6 tries to attack d4. Obviously, knight can retreat, and eventually, after bishop e3, regain a tempo. So it feels like queen didn't really accomplish much. But the fact that the knight has been pushed away from the middle is actually a big achievement, because knight on d4 threatens c6, e6, f5 can go d5. So it is a very active piece. And if it's not around the king area, that's definitely a benefit. So
Sure, yeah.
e6 was now played, castle, bishop e7. Bishop b3. That's just a prophylactic move while Fischer prepares bishop b3. He protects the pawn on b2.
So hold on a second. Wait, I'm curious. So I know a major theme of this is how energetic Bobby Fischer is and everything. So why isn't Bobby Fischer playing energetic moves like sacking pawns and stuff and saying, "Come at me. You can take this b2 pawn."
It's a great question. I am not really super booked up on this variation, let's put it that way. I would assume it would be something like queen b4 that he'd need to be dealing with.
Mm.
And this is still probably possible. Queen takes b2. Also, the computer feels like this is also a possibility. Now, let's say you go knight b5, trying to trap the queen with rook b1, then the queen sneaks back to b4, strikes c4, and what do? If you go knight c7, that'll be one of those temporary wins where you win a little bit of a material and then cough up a whole bunch of it back.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you need when you're playing energetically, you need to make sure you balance that out and everything, and not just go full torque, but be able to hit the brakes sometimes. And looks like that's what he did there on this turn with knight to e2.
Yes, in this particular case, you actually need to make sure that you're not really ahead in development that much. So expecting some kind of a quick ambush against black's position is probably not a realistic possibility.
Makes sense, yeah.
Knight e2. Most people play actually knight b3 in a position like this to avoid spending an extra move on bishop b3. But I think Bobby had a particular setup in mind when he did this. He had in mind the idea of going to g3 later on. I think that's why he went back to e2. Because knight on d3, if you ask yourself that question, what does knight do on b3? You're going to have to scratch your head really hard trying to think of that activity that he's involved in.
Sure, right.
There's not really much you can do besides going back to d4.
Right.
That's what he is on d3. So going to e2 from that perspective looks at least like a more reasonable idea, because then you can go to f4 or g3 and whatnot.
Yeah. So even the incredible Bobby Fischer does retreat sometimes, and he's got some plans for how to follow up with this knight in a second.
He's not retreating, he's regrouping.
Regrouping. Okay, I like it.
Okay. All right, so e6 castle, bishop e7, bishop e3 castle. Okay, so now is a critical position for many people that don't understand what to do in a Sicilian. Now, in a Sicilian, realistically, you have only one kind of attack that you can pull successfully, and that is marching E and F pawns. You really have to march these guys up in order to disturb black's position. Because if you look at this formation here, F7, D6, E6, it pretty much kind of neutralizes anything that comes to the fifth rank. And if you can't come to the fifth rank, attacking opponent's territory is superbly challenging. So what do you need to do? You need to play f4 and then potentially f5. That's kind of what this bishop is here for. He's here to play f4 and then f5 and then take on e6 and so on and loosen up the king side. So f and e pawns are what they call it, kind of your stormtroopers. You want to advance those guys. And frequently to advance them, you want to move away the king from the square g1 to the square h1. For a variety of reasons. First of all, avoiding a pin in this particular situation, but also in some positions when your bishop comes to e3, you want to play. You want to make sure after knight g4 you can retreat to g1, something like that.
Oh, okay.
King h1 is what we call a prophylactical move. Now, if somebody would ask, well, what if you go to g4? Can we just get this guy? Not really. After queen e1, you're very easily going to be booted away from here. So let's say you go bishop d7, and then f3, and then you think, well, I'm going to get here, I'm going to be able to attack things.
Yeah.
No, you will not be able to.
Ooh, yikes. Yeah.
Attacks by knight, and then knight on a3 is going to be stranded and captured. So you want to be careful with that kind of fishing expedition kind of a move. So king h1, and here Mr. Benko goes knight a5, a very standard idea, just sort of, anticipating that the bishop is going to be supporting the f-pawn advance, why not just get rid of it. So here, Bobby plays bishop g5, and queen goes to c5, and then he goes f4. Now, why the bishop goes to go to g5? First of all, it's set up a pin on f6. Secondly, since the knight is going to take b3, the attack with f4, f5 probably loses most of its appeal, right?
Right.
So in that case, you need to think of different things here, but still your f and e pawns are your key to the successful attack against this lane. Whether you're going to play e4, e5, or f4, f5, that's just sort of a secondary question, but you're going to need to move these guys up in order to be successful. So the queen actually goes to c5, earlier went to c5 to stop e4, e5 advance, sort of observing the bishop on g5. So here Mr. Benko plays b5, and Bob Fischer plays knight g3 to make sure that a4 is pretty safe. And here I think what transpired in the next two moves led to the downfall. In this position, I personally feel that Benko did not appreciate the power of the attack that was prepared against him and may have just missed the move that Fischer played. What he should have done, I feel like his business of setting up attack on b3 is kind of unfinished. I think what he should have done, he should have taken on b3, and after he takes b3, should have played bishop b7, pressing the e-pawn that way, connecting the rooks. And now this is where Bobby was preparing knight h5 with the attack on f6, can be met by king h8. And in this position, the computer feels like things are competitive.
Now, why is that move important? King h8.
Because very likely bishop takes f6 was being prepared. So if the g file opens up, you might want as well just use it with the rook from g8, complementing the bishop on b7, potentially attacking e4.
Nice.
So I think this position is playable, would have been playable. Instead, Mr. Benko here plays b4. Now you can see immediately evaluation switches back to because I think Benko expected something like knight a4, queen c7, and life is good. That was probably his thinking about this whole position. He controls e5. If knight goes to h5, you just take on h5, trade everything off, get bishop to d7. Great
Sure.
position.
Right.
Instead, now you were asking in the beginning about Bobby's energetic style. Here's the energy for you.
Ooh, nice.
e4, e5. All pieces are set in place, so time to go for it. And now you can see why getting the knight to g3 was a good idea. Now you got possibility of knight h5. You got a possibility of knight e4. So there's a variety of ways that White is able to utilize that square positively. So here...
There's a time and a place for aggression, and this is that time, it looks like.
That's right. So let's say b takes c3, e takes f6, and then g takes f6. Well, after bishop h6, there's a threat of checkmate with queen g4. So you kind of have to move to h8, and then say knight e4, another strike against the queen. Queen moves. Take on f8, and then knight takes c3. And there you go. What do you have here? White is up on exchange. There's no reason to believe that there is any serious compensation for it. There's definitely going to be some play. Obviously, you've got a bishop pair. Every time you have a bishop pair, there's always something. But
yeah, there's some compensation for sure. It's not completely over.
It is not a completely over situation, but overall, the position is definitely in favor of White, I think.
But White's behind in development. Are you sure? What looks like black's the one that's attacking now.
Well, he's attacking anything that's guarded here. He attacks f4, that's protected. He's attacking g3, that's protected. So what can he actually attack that he can actually take? That's a big question.
Well,
I've rook f1 coming up, and that's it. End of story.
I've heard that doubled pawns are bad, so I'm gonna take this way on g3 and then bring the queen over to the h file. What do you think of that?
How do you bring the queen to the h file? Let's say you go queen c5 trying to get to h5. Okay, let's say you did succeed getting there. But before you do, I'm probably going to give you a little bit of a workout on that one. You really can't get there that easily, and I'm preparing in the next move to bring my rook over.
Right.
Like I said, there's a little bit of a compensation, but probably not sufficient enough to be worthwhile.
Right. I might turn that into an activity, so if you guys are listening, I might put a link down below. You can try to win that position yourself.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting idea here. So, objectively, actually, maybe this b takes c3 wasn't really that bad an idea, because you get the bishop pair at the end. The bishop on b7 is very powerful. What he did in the game clearly did not get him into a better position. So he actually took on e5, and here Bobby played bishop takes f6, and here, after bishop takes f6, he played g takes f6, and I think that kind of set him off into a bad position. What he should have done is taken on c3. And in this position, queen g4 is not yet possible, and if you go knight e4, you attack c5 and you protect f6 for a sec, but he goes queen b4 and he attacks both of your pieces. You have to go queen g4 trying to mate on g7, but then you can take here and play king h8, and you don't quite have any mate, although probably after rook f3 this is still a super exciting position.
Yeah, no kidding.
He takes b2, rook d1, and then queen e7. Kind of a typical Sicilian mess. Now the computer thinks that white is winning after f takes c5. Quite possible, if you actually look at the position, you can kind of see that the king there feels very lonely and stranded. So b takes c3 apparently not as good initially as initially thought.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why Mr. Benko played g takes f6. Or actually, the idea of that move was obviously to preserve the bishop and prepare escape to h8. But now Fischer brings over the knights. Knight e4 attacks the queen. Queen goes to d4 and queen h5. And now you can see the attack is shaping up quite badly for black. Can black play f5? No. Should black take on b3? That's what he did. Now, most obvious move is to take on f4, but here Fischer prepared a super tricky move. Knight f5. Look at that move.
Whoa.
What beauty that is. The queen g4 is a very, very beautiful check that's coming up. Very simple but powerful. So you have to take on f5, and then after rook takes f4, you've got a couple of threats here. One of them is knight g5, second one is rook h4. So you can't really move the rook from f8 because f7 still is attacked. So you have to kind of kill the knight.
Wow.
Give up the queen.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if you actually count all the pieces in the end, you could see that white has a queen for bishop and a rook. Not a resignable position yet, but definitely a very tough one. The computer values this at about extra piece or so in white's favor. So you can see that white is better development. King not quite safe on g8. Bishop on b3 is pretty good. The pawns are kind of spread all over the place.
How far ahead do you think he saw that? Did he see that before knight f5?
Oh, I'm quite sure he did. It's not really a super complicated thing to see, actually.
Yeah. Maybe
and what's
maybe
the idea behind this? The idea was to actually block that square. Because otherwise, g4 is unavailable and h4 is unavailable. If you go knight g5, he can actually go and play queen g7, and suddenly you didn't succeed in your attack.
Right.
The knight is hit, you can't help. So knight f5 is actually a blocking move. He just kind of seals that bishop down there, and the bishop cannot control h4, and the rook joins as a decisive effect.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to this position, Mr. Benko killed that offender there, but it turns out to be a mistake. After that, the game was over very quickly. So here the two knights are near the king, and they're kind of itching to checkmate it. So he goes queen to h6, not taking the knight. He's threatening knight h5.
Wow.
You can't really take this guy. After knight h5, there's mate on g7, and there's knight takes f6 check. Two threats, you can't stop anything.
Wow.
So suddenly position basically went downhill from here. Black played e takes f4, and Bob Fischer went knight h5, setting up his mate. And then Benko played f5. Now, what is he trying to do? Well, he's hoping for this check, which initially looks like a great idea, except the queen can actually sack itself. And after queen takes, I don't know, can taking here allow him to escape? Do we have a mate there? The computer says we don't.
Yeah, black can hold that now. Too much material given up.
Yeah, he's in up a fair amount of material, lots of stuff. So you could see here that even in a winning position, you kind of need to pay attention to what you're doing. Now, Bobby, of course, did not miss that opportunity. He actually simply played rook a to d1. He strikes the queen, and now, if you actually repeat the same position and the same play, you will see that in that situation, knight no longer has the rook to take on a1, which is going to be a major difference.
Right.
So when he goes to e5, now this knight of 6 routine is actually very much winning. So now no rook to take, he has to go knight c5 escaping, and Bobby finishes this up. He plays check, king h8, a nice cool move here, queen e7.
Ooh, wow.
And now you get yourself a fork. Bishop a6 is the only move. Queen takes on c5. Bishop takes f1. Rook takes f1. Now all of that excitement finally settled in. Benko probably looked at this position and thought, well, maybe next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's got a fair number of pawns, but you can't really play against the queen with just your pawns. So how many pawns does he have? 7 pawns versus 5. But either b4 or f4, they're both dying. There's no way you can hold them. And
yeah,
the pawns are
hopeless.
really nothing. Rook and 2 pawns are not matched for a queen in the first place, especially when you're about to lose the pawns back.
These games are fantastic. I'm loving this series we're doing. What another just amazing game by Bobby Fischer.
Yeah, great game by Bobby Fischer. Bobby really executed a couple of very common Sicilian concepts. Specifically, this pawn break with e5. I just want to go back to that position for a second. And
yeah, what were like the two big highlights, would you say? The big, two big takeaways?
Well, the big takeaway here, when you play Sicilian, you kind of need to be with black or with white, very energetic and kind of very thorough. Calculate your plays and pay attention to strikes and counter strikes. Like b4, it's kind of a careless move in a way because white pretty much set up all the pieces and he's getting ready to play e4, e5. Because knights, this is sort of like an energy release moment. This concept here, like if you look at white's pieces, what do they all want? They want openings for themselves, they want open position up, they want attacking opportunities. But the pawns in front of them holds them together, so holds them away. So if you go e5, now the knights get the square e4, and after the opening, the rook is going to get the f file, and then the queen, once the knight on f6 is removed, can go to attack to h5 or g4. So
right.
You see that e5 is actually kind of a critical move, and Benko, as experienced Sicilian player, should have definitely seen it. So this would have been absolutely mandatory to play and complete the development. Kind of a simple concept, completing the development. But here, he also controls e4 a lot better. Like, for instance, here playing e5 probably is not going to work. Because if you play e5, d takes e5, knight e4, well, e4 is protected. You can't even do that.
Right.
So I think here he misjudged the position. And like I said, this is probably not such an easy situation, but black is actually favored here. If you look at this, he's got a bishop pair, completed development, pressure against e4, and more or less safe king, because if you go bishop f6, g takes f6, and rook is going to come to g8, that g file is going to backfire on you, and knight on h5 all in its own right can't really do much. So that's probably kind
And
of the
what
key
again
moment.
makes up for such a big difference? Why is this attack so mute now?
Why is this not? Well, e4 square is under good control. The bishop is there.
Right.
Like the big difference here was this b4 move, and let's see, where was it? b4 here. Look at this position here, right there. Now, the big difference here is that e4 square is well supported. So this is how he went, I think, in the game, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. So just that one square, vacancy difference is really a huge factor because it allows white's pieces to regroup towards the king side. Sounds like.
That's right. That's correct. That move allows the pieces to join the attack, whereas in other position, that's not an option.
Similar to another video we did about pawn breakthroughs a couple of months ago. Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
it's very similar. It's actually also a little bit of a pawn break game.
Yep. Yeah.
It's a classical Sicilian bust.
Cool stuff. Yeah. And then that was highlight number 1. What was the other big takeaway from this one?
The big takeaway, well, sometimes
That
it's
Bobby
very
Fischer's amazing and has beautiful chess games, right?
sound right, but sometimes you gotta understand that when you play Sicilian, every once in a while it's okay to retreat. Like knight e2 is a reasonable move. Most people say, well, no, I can't retreat. I gotta go to f5. I gotta go take on c6. I gotta go knight to b5. No, you need to kind of measure your resources and understand what you're trying to do. Like why knight e2 is a playable move. The reason is that primarily in this variation, white attacks on the king side. So he's going to probably play castle, f4, and then once that happens, f4, f5 is going to be an important part of the attack, or e4, e5. Knight can actually redeploy to g3 and play knight h5, removing this attacker from f6. Whereas if he actually goes back to b3, you can see that's not going to be particularly useful.
None of that, yeah. Terrific. Well, thank you so much. I think we should call it there. Like I said, really enjoying these series. What do you have in mind for the next one? Another Bobby Fischer game, I presume?
Another Bobby Fischer game. Probably the Bobby Fischer wins with black.
All right.
Lots of his attacks was white. We want to take a look at his black play as well.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you so much, Jordy. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. Bye.
And just like that, another one bites the dust. Bobby Fischer, a truly legendary player who will forever. I'm using my hands a lot. Is that working? How do we feel about this? I feel like an orchestra conductor. No, Bobby Fischer, really incredible player. Hope you're enjoying this series. Hopefully you're learning a lot and is keeping you on your toes. Play lots of chess. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys later.